The night Dante Romano told her his wife was pregnant, Lena Marquez stopped breathing. 3 years of stolen moments, whispered promises in dark rooms, love letters hidden in apron pockets, all of it shattered in one sentence. He chose duty. She chose survival. That night, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind the only man who ever made her feel alive. But 5 years later, when black SUVs roll up to her Chicago apartment and Dante steps out carrying a little boy, Lena realizes some stories don't end, they just wait. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Let's begin. The Rosewood Hotel restaurant hummed with the kind of quiet wealth that never needed to announce itself. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths, and conversations floated in hushed tones, business deals disguised as dinner, affairs dressed up as networking. Lena Marquez moved through it all like a ghost, her black uniform blending into the shadows between tables, her presence so practiced at invisibility that diners often startled when she appeared to refill water glasses. She perfected the art of not being seen, head down, voice soft, movements efficient. The less memorable she was, the safer she felt. At 23, she'd already learned that being noticed meant being vulnerable, and vulnerability meant pain. But Dante Romano noticed everything. He sat alone at table 12, the corner booth that management kept reserved even when he didn't call ahead. Lena had served him twice before, both times brief, professional, forgettable encounters where he'd barely glanced up from his phone. She knew who he was. Everyone did. You didn't work in upscale Manhattan restaurants without learning to recognize the names that mattered, the faces that commanded rooms without effort. Dante Romano wasn't just wealthy. He was power itself, wrapped in custom suits and cold authority. Tonight, something was different. Lena approached with her usual careful neutrality, water pitcher in hand. "Good evening, Mr. Romano. Can I start you with, 'You're left-handed'?" She froze, pitcher suspended mid-pour. His voice was deep, measured, the kind that didn't need volume to carry weight. For the first time in 3 visits, he was actually looking at her, really looking. Yes, sir." The words came out smaller than she intended. "But you serve right-handed. You've trained yourself to." His dark eyes tracked the subtle shift of her grip, the practiced compensation. Why? No one had ever noticed, not in 5 years of waitressing. Lena's throat tightened. "Customers expect consistency. It's more professional. Or you learned early that standing out gets you hurt." The observation landed like a physical blow. Lena's hand trembled slightly, water sloshing against the rim of his glass. She set the pitcher down before she could spill it, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I should take your order," she managed. "Sit down." "I can't." 5 minutes." It wasn't a command, despite the authority in his tone. It was something stranger. A request from a man who clearly didn't make many. "Please." Lena glanced toward the kitchen, then back at him. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain the professional distance that kept her safe. But something in his expression stopped her. A loneliness that mirrored her own, hidden beneath layers of control so tight she recognized it instantly. She sat. "What's your name?" Dante asked. Lena Marquez." "How long have you been invisible, Lena?" The question stole her breath. She stared at him, this dangerous stranger who somehow saw straight through every wall she'd built. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." He leaned forward slightly, his focus absolute. "You move through this room like you're apologizing for existing. Like if you're quiet enough, small enough, maybe the world will forget you're there and leave you alone." Lena's eyes burned. She should stand up, walk away, report this conversation to her manager and request a different section. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Since I was 8. Dante's jaw tightened, something flickering behind his carefully controlled expression. "What happened when you were 8? "My father left. My mother, she got tired of having to take care of someone. I learned it was easier if I didn't need anything, didn't ask for anything, didn't take up space. And you've been disappearing ever since." It wasn't a question. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "I see you," Dante said quietly. "Every time you walk through that door, I see you." The words cracked something open inside her chest. Lena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to... Your order, Lena. She stopped, not turning around. Same time next week? It was madness. He was a customer. More than that, he was Dante Romano, a man whose name carried weight and danger in equal measure. Getting involved with someone like him would be the opposite of invisible, the opposite of safe. Table 12, she said softly. 8 o'clock. She felt his smile more than saw it. Table 12. 10. The next 6 months unfolded like a fever dream. Dante came every Tuesday, always alone, always at 8. At first, they talked in the brief moments between her other tables, fragments of conversation stolen while she poured wine or cleared plates. He asked questions no one had ever bothered to ask. What did she read? What made her laugh? When was the last time she'd done something just because it made her happy? Lena found herself answering honestly, this man pulling truths from her with the same quiet intensity he brought to everything. He told her about his world, too, carefully edited versions that acknowledged the weight he carried without naming its source. She knew he was married. He wore the ring. But he never mentioned a wife, and Lena never asked. By week 8, he started arriving earlier, staying later. The restaurant staff noticed, whispered, but no one dared comment. Management certainly wasn't going to complain about their most valuable client extending his visits. By week 12, Lena stopped pretending this was just friendly conversation. Come with me, Dante said one Tuesday in late spring after the dinner rush had faded and the restaurant was nearly empty. Just for a drive, 1 hour. I can't leave during my shift. He pulled out his phone, made a single call. 2 minutes later, her manager appeared, smiling too brightly. Lena, why don't you take the rest of the night off? You've been working so hard. She should have been terrified by that display of power. Instead, she felt something dangerously close to cherished. The car waiting outside was black and pristine, the kind of vehicle that cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. Dante held the door for her, and Lena slid into leather seats so soft they felt like a betrayal of everything she knew about her place in the world. Where are we going? She asked as the city lights blurred past. Nowhere special. I just wanted to hear you talk without interruption. They drove through Manhattan, then across the bridge into Brooklyn, the skyline glittering behind them. Dante asked about her childhood, her dreams, the things she'd given up to survive. Lena found herself confessing fears she'd never spoken aloud. The terror of being left again, the exhaustion of trying to be small enough to keep, the loneliness that had become so familiar it felt like a friend. You deserve to take up space, Dante said, as they parked near the waterfront, the Statue of Liberty distant and green against the night. You deserve to be loud and difficult and demanding. You deserve to need things. That's easy for you to say. She gestured vaguely at him, at the car, at everything he represented. Powerful? His laugh was bitter. I built an empire on other people's fear. I made myself untouchable because being vulnerable meant being weak, and weakness meant losing everything. I'm no different than you, Lena. I'm just invisible in a different way. She turned to face him fully. You're the opposite of invisible. No. People see what I allow them to see. The power, the control, the man who doesn't bend. They don't see this. He touched his chest right over his heart. They don't see the parts of me that feel anything. I do, Lena whispered. I know. That's why I can't stay away from you. He kissed her then, and Lena let herself fall into it, into him, knowing it was reckless and wrong and completely inevitable. His hands cradled her face like she was precious, like she mattered, and for the first time in her life, Lena felt seen down to her bones. They carved out a secret world after that. Tuesday dinners became Thursday lunches, Saturday walks, stolen afternoons in a small apartment Dante kept across town. He never brought her to his home, never mentioned his wife beyond acknowledging her existence. Lena told herself she could live in the margins of his life, that being someone's secret was better than being no one's anything. She fell in love anyway. It happened in small moments. The way Dante learned her coffee order without being told. The books that appeared on her doorstep, volumes of poetry and fiction she'd mentioned once in passing. The night she got food poisoning and woke to find him sitting beside her bed, having somehow acquired a key and medical supplies, his expression tight with worry. You stayed, she'd whispered. Of course I stayed. Your wife. Is at her mother's in Connecticut. She won't be back until Sunday. He'd smoothed hair from her forehead, his touch unbearably gentle. I'm here, Lena. I'm here. Months blurred into a year, then 2, then 3. Lena stopped taking up applications to other jobs, stopped imagining a life beyond Tuesday dinners and stolen weekends. She became fluent in the language of their arrangement, knowing when to ask questions and when to stay silent, reading his moods in the set of his shoulders, finding joy in the spaces between his complicated life. She wrote him letters she never sent, filled notebooks with everything she couldn't say aloud. I love you, I love you. I would burn my life down for one real day with you. I'm terrified I already have. Dante never said the words either, but she felt them in the way he touched her, the way he listened, the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in a world built on illusions. It should have been enough. The end came on a Tuesday. Dante arrived late, his expression strained in a way Lena had learned to dread. They sat in the apartment, untouched wine glasses between them, the silence stretching too long. I need to tell you something, he finally said. Lena's stomach dropped. Okay. Catherine is pregnant. 3 words. The world tilted. Oh. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. That's... Congratulations. Lena, how far along? 4 months. 4 months. They'd been together just last week, his hands in her hair, his breath against her skin, promises in every kiss. 4 months meant he'd known for a while. 4 months meant he'd been carrying this secret while she'd been carrying hope. Are you happy? The question came out steadier than she felt. Dante's expression cracked. I don't know what I am. But you're staying with her. Not a question. A fact solidifying in the air between them. I have to. The family, there are expectations. Legacies. A child changes everything. I understand. And she did. She understood perfectly. She was the woman you loved in the margins. His wife was the woman you built a future with. I never meant for this to happen, Dante said, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked lost. I never meant to hurt you. Lena laughed, the sound sharp and painful. You made me visible, Dante. For 3 years you made me matter. That's not nothing. That's not something I'll regret. Don't do that. Don't make this noble. What do you want me to do? Fall apart? Beg you to choose me? She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. I knew what this was. I knew I was temporary. You were never temporary. His voice broke. You're the most real thing in my life. But not real enough. He flinched. If there was any other way, there isn't. There never was. Lena forced herself to meet his eyes. You should go. Oh, Lena, please, go, Dante, please, while I can still let you. He stood slowly, and she memorized him, the way he moved, the exact shade of his eyes, the weight of his presence. She memorized it all because she knew she'd never let herself see him again. At the door, he turned back. I love you. I need you to know that. I love you. I know, Lena whispered. That's what makes this impossible. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like an ending. Lena didn't cry. Not that night, not the next morning when she called in sick to work, not the following Tuesday when she wrote her resignation letter in careful, steady script. She bought a train ticket to Chicago, far enough to matter, affordable enough to manage. She packed 2 suitcases, left everything else behind, and told no one where she was going. Not her coworkers, not her landlord, not the few casual friends she'd maintained at arm's length. She especially didn't tell Dante. The night before she left, she finally let herself break. She sat on the floor of her empty apartment and read through 3 years of unsent letters, every confession of love and fear and desperate hope. Then she burned them, one by one, watching her words turn to ash in the kitchen sink. She burned everything except one. The last letter. The one that said, I loved you enough to disappear. I hope that means something. I hope you find happiness with her, with your child, with the life you're building. I hope you forget me just enough to stop hurting, but not completely, never completely, because for 3 years you made me matter, and I need to believe that mattered to you too. Goodbye, Dante. Thank you for seeing me. L. She left the letter on the apartment counter, knowing he'd find it eventually. Then Lena Marquez walked out of her old life and into the kind of invisibility she'd chosen for herself, the kind that didn't hurt quite so much as being seen and left behind. The train pulled out of Penn Station at dawn. Lena pressed her forehead against the window and watched Manhattan disappear into the distance, carrying with it the only love she'd ever known. She didn't let herself look back. She didn't let herself hope he'd come after her. She just survived, the way she'd always survived, by making herself small enough to slip through the cracks of her own breaking heart. Chicago smelled different than Manhattan, less exhaust and ambition, more wind and honest grit. Lena had chosen it specifically because it was large enough to disappear into, but small enough to feel navigable, a city where she could rebuild without the constant weight of memories lurking around every corner. The first year was survival in its purest form. She found a studio apartment in Pilsen, fourth-floor walk-up, with radiators that clanked through the night and neighbors who minded their own business. The rent was cheap enough to manage on a clinic aide salary, the kind of work that required no questions about her past, no references beyond a basic certification she'd earned online during sleepless New York nights. Mercy Heights Community Clinic served the city's forgotten. Immigrants without papers, addicts trying to get clean, families too poor for proper insurance. Lena fit right in among people who understood that sometimes you had to disappear from one life to survive into another. "You're good at this," Dr. Sarah Chen said 6 months in, watching Lena calm a terrified child enough to allow a vaccination. "You should consider nursing school." Lena had smiled and deflected. Nursing school meant applications, background checks, financial aid forms that asked too many questions. It meant planning for a future, and she was still just trying to survive the present. Besides, she liked the simplicity of her work, checking vital signs, restocking supplies, holding hands during difficult news. She was good at being present without taking up space, at offering comfort without demanding recognition. Her old skills, repurposed. The second year, the nightmares began to fade. Lena stopped waking up expecting to find Dante beside her, stopped reaching for her phone to text him about small moments he'd want to know. She learned Chicago's rhythms, which train lines ran late, where to find decent coffee, the library branch that stayed open until 9. She made something like friends. Marco, the phlebotomist who brought homemade tamales every Friday. Yuki, the receptionist who insisted Lena join her book club despite Lena's protests. They didn't push for her history, seemed to understand that Chicago was full of people running from something. "You ever going to tell us what brought you here?" Yuki asked once, casual over cheap wine in Lena's apartment. "Maybe someday," Lena had answered, and they'd let it drop. By year 3, Lena had built something that resembled a life. Not the one she'd imagined during those stolen afternoons with Dante, but something honest. She volunteered at a women's shelter on weekends, teaching other women who'd disappeared themselves how to rebuild. She adopted a cat, a scarred tabby named Widget, who'd been abandoned at the clinic. She even went on 2 dates with a kind physical therapist named Aaron, though both had ended in polite acknowledgement that neither of them was ready. Year 4 brought a promotion to senior clinic aide and a slightly better apartment, same building, better view. Lena started saving money, thinking vaguely about maybe, eventually, considering nursing school. She let her hair grow long again, stopped looking over her shoulder quite so often. She almost convinced herself she was healed. But late at night, when Chicago was quiet and Widget was curled against her side, Lena still thought about Dante. She wondered if his child had been a boy or girl, if fatherhood had softened him or made him harder. She wondered if he'd found her letter, if he'd looked for her, if he'd let her go easily, or if her absence had left a mark. She wondered if he ever thought about the woman who'd loved him enough to disappear. Then she'd push the thoughts away, remind herself that wondering was just another form of holding on, and she'd promised herself she'd let go. 5 years and 2 months after leaving New York, Lena finally felt like she might actually make it. That's when the black SUVs appeared. It was a Thursday evening in late October, the kind of crisp autumn day that made Chicago beautiful and bitter in equal measure. Lena was walking home from the clinic, grocery bag in one arm, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether she had enough energy to cook or should just order Thai food. She noticed the vehicles because they didn't belong. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows idling outside her building in a neighborhood where most people drove 15-year-old sedans or took the bus. They had the kind of shine that screamed money and the kind of stillness that screamed purpose. Lena's stomach dropped. She knew those vehicles. Not specifically, but the type. She'd seen them before, waiting outside the Rosewood Hotel, outside that apartment in Manhattan where she'd lived in the margins of someone else's life. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to drop the groceries and disappear into the Chicago evening, to become invisible one more time. But her legs carried her forward anyway, drawn by the terrible magnetism of fate arriving exactly when you'd finally stopped expecting it. The rear door of the first SU-5 opened. Dante Romano stepped out. He looked older. 5 years had carved lines around his eyes, threaded silver through his dark hair at the temples. He'd always carried weight, but now it seemed heavier, authority that had calcified into something harder, lonelier. He wore a dark coat against the Chicago wind, and his expression when he saw her held everything she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Recognition, regret, relief. But it was the small boy he lifted from the car seat that made Lena's breath stop entirely. The child couldn't have been more than 3, dark-haired and solemn, with eyes that tracked everything with unsettling awareness. He wore a navy peacoat that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent, and he clutched a stuffed dinosaur like a lifeline. Dante's son. The baby that had ended everything. Lena. Dante's voice carried across the sidewalk, and hearing him say her name after 5 years of silence felt like a wound reopening. She should say something, should demand to know how he'd found her, what he wanted, why he was here with his child. Instead, she just stood there, grocery bag cutting into her arm, staring at the life she'd run from standing on her doorstep. I know I have no right to be here, Dante continued when she didn't respond. I know what I'm asking is impossible, but I need to talk to you, please. How did you find me? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Does it matter? Yes. He exhaled slowly. I've known where you were for 4 years. I've had people watching, at a distance, just to make sure you were safe. I never contacted you because you made it clear you wanted to be gone. But things have changed, and He paused, glancing down at the boy who was watching this exchange with disturbing focus. I need to talk to you. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You're asking for more than 5 minutes, and you know it. Lena's hands trembled. You're asking me to let you back in, even just a crack, and I can't. I built something here, Dante. Something that doesn't hurt all the time. You can't just show up and, Papa, who is she? The boy's voice was small but clear, cutting through Lena's rising panic. Dante's expression softened in a way that made Lena's chest ache. This is Lena. She's an old friend, someone who's very important to me. Is she sad? The child asked this with the brutal honesty only small children possessed. Dante looked at Lena, and she saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. Yes, buddy, she's sad. Are you sad too? Yes. Why? It was Lena who answered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt people they care about. The boy considered this with startling gravity. Did you make a mistake? Yes, Dante said quietly. I made a terrible one. Lena closed her eyes, fighting against the wave of emotion threatening to pull her under. When she opened them again, Dante was closer, the child still in his arms, and the expression on his face held something she'd never seen before. Raw vulnerability that had nothing to do with power or control. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I'm not asking you to come back or to give me another chance. I'm just asking you to talk to me. Because my son, his voice cracked slightly, my son needs to know there are still good people in the world, and you're the best person I've ever known. It was the worst possible thing he could have said, because it was clearly true. Lena could see it in the way he held the boy, the careful tenderness in his hands, the exhaustion around his eyes. Whatever had happened in the last 5 years had broken something in Dante Romano, and he'd come to her not out of selfishness, but out of desperate hope that she could help fix what mattered most. One conversation, Lena heard herself say. Tomorrow, not here. There's a park 3 blocks west, Palmer Square, 2 o'clock. Relief flooded Dante's features. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might still tell you to disappear and never come back. That would be fair. Lena nodded, unable to look at him anymore without breaking. She shifted her gaze to the child instead. What's your name? The boy buried his face briefly in Dante's shoulder, suddenly shy, before peeking out. Nico. That's a good name. Lena managed a small smile. I like your dinosaur. Nico held up the stuffed animal. His name is Rex. He's a Tyrannosaurus. Very fierce. Not really. He mostly likes to sleep and eat crackers. Despite everything, Lena felt something warm bloom in her chest. Sounds like a good dinosaur to me. She forced herself to step back, to break whatever spell was forming. 2 o'clock tomorrow. Don't be late. I won't be. Lena walked into her building without looking back, climbed 4 flights of stairs on shaking legs, and locked herself in her apartment before the tears came. Widget appeared immediately, winding around her ankles with concerned meows. Lena sank to the floor and let herself sob. For the life she'd left, for the life she'd built, for the impossible choice that had just appeared on her doorstep wearing a child's face and carrying her past in its hands. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. It's Dante. I'm sorry. For everything. But especially for not saying it 5 years ago. Lena stared at the message for a long time before typing back. You said you'd had people watching me. For 4 years. His response came immediately. Yes. Why? The pause stretched longer this time. Then, because I needed to know you were okay. Because letting you go was the hardest thing I've ever done. And knowing you were safe was the only thing that made it bearable. Your wife. What happened? Another long pause. Tomorrow. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. I promise. Lena set her phone down, her mind racing through implications and possibilities, each one more complicated than the last. Dante was here, in Chicago, with his son. Something had happened, something significant enough to bring him across state lines and into her carefully reconstructed life. She should be angrier. Should tell him to leave and never come back. Should protect the fragile peace she'd built from the hurricane of everything he represented. Instead, she found herself thinking about Nico's solemn eyes and the way Dante had held him, like fatherhood had taught him something about tenderness that power never could. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Lena lay awake listening to Chicago sounds, sirens and wind and the couple arguing 2 floors down, and tried to prepare herself for whatever tomorrow would bring. At 1:30 in the morning, her phone buzzed again. I read your letter, the one you left. I've read it 1,000 times. I'm so sorry, Lena, for all of it. She should ignore it, should set boundaries, should protect herself from falling back into the gravitational pull of Dante Romano. But her fingers were already moving. Did you name him after your grandfather? Yes. And after you? Lena's breath caught. What? Nico. It's short for Nicodemus. Victory of the people. Catherine chose it from a list I gave her, never knowing why it mattered to me, but I remembered what you said once, that you wanted to believe people could win sometimes, even when the world was stacked against them. Every time I say his name, I think of you. Lena pressed her palm against her mouth, fresh tears streaming down her face. That's not fair, I know. Nothing about this is fair. I'll understand if you tell me to leave tomorrow. But I had to try. For him. He deserves to know the person who taught me that love doesn't have to be another form of control. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Eventually, she heard Widget jump onto the bed, felt the cat's warm weight settle against her side. Lena stared at the ceiling and wondered how 5 years of distance could evaporate in a single evening, how a child she'd never met could already be working his way into her heart, how the man she'd loved and left could still find ways to crack her open with a few honest words. Tomorrow would come regardless. The only question was what she'd choose to do when it arrived. Palmer Square Park was mostly empty when Lena arrived at 1:50, just a few joggers and a woman walking 3 small dogs. The October sun was bright but offered little warmth, and Lena wrapped her jacket tighter as she chose a bench near the playground. Dante appeared at exactly 2 o'clock, Nico's hand clasped in his. They walked slowly, the child stopping to examine fallen leaves and pointing excitedly at a squirrel that darted up a tree. Watching them together, Lena saw the shift that fatherhood had created. The way Dante moved at a child's pace, the gentle patience in his posture, the soft responses to Nico's constant observations. Papa, can I go on the swings? Nico asked as they approached. Stay where I can see you, Dante said, and stay away from the big slide. Nico ran off with Rex the dinosaur tucked under his arm, and Dante sat down beside Lena. Not too close, respectful of the space between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "He's beautiful," Lena finally said, watching Nico attempt to climb into a swing by himself. "He's everything." Dante's voice held a depth of feeling that made Lena's throat tight. Catherine died when he was 6 months old. Brain aneurysm. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. Lena turned to stare at him. "Dante, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because you asked what happened, and you deserve the truth." He kept his eyes on Nico. The pregnancy was difficult, high risk. She was on bed rest for the last 3 months. I spent that time being the dutiful husband, preparing the nursery, going to every appointment, and every single day I thought about you, wondered where you'd gone, if you were okay, if you hated me. "I didn't hate you." The words came out raw. "I wanted to. It would have been easier." When Nico was born, something shifted. Looking at this tiny person who needed me completely, it was terrifying. I'd spent my whole life building power, creating distance, making sure I couldn't be hurt. And suddenly I had this child who made me vulnerable in ways I'd never imagined. Nico had managed to get himself into the swing and was attempting to pump his legs, not quite getting the rhythm right. Dante stood and walked over, giving him a gentle push. Lena watched the easy affection between them, the way Nico laughed and demanded, "Higher, Papa," and Dante complied with careful precision. When Dante returned to the bench, his expression was heavier. Catherine was a good mother in those 6 months, better than I was a husband. She loved Nico fiercely. When she died, he paused, gathering himself. "I kept thinking about what you'd said, that choosing duty cost everyone. Catherine never got to see him grow up. You disappeared. And I was left with this beautiful child and the knowledge that every choice I'd made had been the wrong one. You can't know that, can't I? You vanished without a trace, Lena. No forwarding address, no contact information. It took my people 8 months to find you, and when they did, I made them swear to keep their distance. Because you'd chosen to leave, and I owed you that much, to respect your choice, even though it was killing me." Lena's hands twisted in her lap. "Why are you here now? After 5 years of respecting that choice, why break it?" Dante turned to face her fully. "Because 3 weeks ago, Nico woke up from a nightmare and asked me if love was real or just something people said before they left. He's 3 years old, Lena. 3. And he's already learning that people disappear, that trust is dangerous, that caring about someone means preparing for them to be gone." The words hit like a physical blow. Lena watched Nico on the swing, the small child who'd already lost his mother, who was being raised by a father who'd built an empire on emotional distance. "I don't know how to teach him differently," Dante continued quietly. "I don't know how to show him that love can be something other than loss. Every person in my life has an agenda, wants something, stays because they're paid to or because they're afraid to leave. Except you. You left because staying was destroying you, and you did it without asking for anything. That's the most honest thing anyone's ever done for me. So you want me to what? Come back? Prove to your son that sometimes people stay? No, I want—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "I want to try again. To do this right. To see if there's any possibility that what we had wasn't just beautiful, but could also be real. Sustainable. Something built on truth instead of stolen moments." Lena's heart was racing. "Your wife has been gone less than 3 years. Your son just lost his mother, and you want to bring someone new into that? Not someone new, you, the person I should have chosen 5 years ago." Dante's voice cracked. "The person I've never stopped loving." "Don't." Lena stood abruptly. "Don't say that like it fixes anything." Dante stood too, careful to maintain distance. "I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to be honest. For once in my life, I'm trying to tell someone the complete truth without calculating the cost." "And what is the truth, Dante? That you love me? I knew that 5 years ago. You said it right before you chose your wife and your duty and your perfect legacy. Love wasn't enough then. Why would it be enough now?" "Because I'm not the same man I was then. Because watching Catherine die taught me that duty and legacy mean nothing if you're living a lie. Because every night I read Nico a story and tuck him in and think about what kind of man I want him to become. And I know I can't teach him to be good if I keep choosing to be what my world expects instead of what's right. Lena pressed her hands against her eyes, trying to hold back tears. This isn't fair. You can't just show up with your son and your grief and your promises and expect me to— Papa! Nico's voice cut through the tension. He'd abandoned the swings and was running toward them, Rex the dinosaur dragging in the dirt behind him. Papa, I saw a really big bird. It was blue and really, really loud. Dante's expression shifted instantly, the vulnerability replaced by gentle focus. A blue jay, probably. Did it fly away? Yeah, but it yelled at a squirrel first. Can birds and squirrels talk to each other? I think they can understand each other well enough to argue about territory. Nico seemed to accept this, then turned his attention to Lena. The directness of his gaze was startling, too knowing for such a young child. Why were you and Papa talking in sad voices? Lena crouched down to his level, instinct overriding her emotional chaos. Because grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings about things that happened a long time ago. Are you going to make Papa happy again? The question stole her breath. What makes you think I could do that? Because he smiles different when he looks at you, like he does when I draw him pictures. Like happy that goes all the way inside. Lena glanced up at Dante, who looked equally gutted by his son's observation. Nico, that's not something Lena can fix. But she's here now, Nico interrupted with the simple logic of childhood. When people are here, they can help. That's what you tell me. It's more complicated than that, buddy. Oh, everything's always more complicated. That's what grown-ups always say when they mean hard. Nico reached out and took Lena's hand with complete trust, his small fingers wrapping around hers. You're nice. Rex likes you. Can we get hot chocolate? Lena found herself laughing through tears. Your father and I need to talk. We can talk over hot chocolate, Dante said quietly. If you're willing. She should say no, should establish boundaries, should protect herself from the inevitable hurt of letting these two people into her carefully rebuilt life. But Nico was looking at her with such pure hope, and Dante's expression held a vulnerability she'd never seen during their years of stolen moments, and Lena was so tired of being afraid. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here, she heard herself say. They have excellent hot chocolate and dinosaur-shaped cookies. Nico's face lit up. Rex would love that. They walked together through autumn-bright streets, Nico between them chattering about birds and squirrels and whether dinosaurs would have liked hot chocolate. Every few steps, the boy would reach for both their hands, creating a chain that felt dangerously like family. At the cafe, Nico discovered the dinosaur cookies and declared them the best thing in Chicago. Dante and Lena sat across from each other, watching this small person who'd somehow become the bridge between their past and whatever possibilities stretched ahead. I'm not promising anything, Lena said quietly, while Nico was absorbed in making Rex bite cookie pieces. I can't just forget 5 years because you showed up and said the right things. I know. And bringing your son into this, Dante, if we try again and it doesn't work, he's the one who gets hurt. I know that too. Dante's hand rested on the table between them, not reaching for her, but present. That's why I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm asking if you'd be willing to let us try to be part of your life. Slowly. Carefully. Let Nico get to know you. Let me prove that I've changed, and if at any point you decide this isn't what you want, I'll respect that and disappear again. Lena studied him, looking for the calculation she'd always seen beneath his declarations. But his eyes held only exhausted honesty and fragile hope. Why Chicago? She asked. Why move here instead of asking me to come back? Because New York was about my world, my rules, my convenience. I needed to come to you, to step into your life instead of demanding you fit into mine. Nico looked up from his cookies. I like Chicago. It smells like cinnamon, and the wind talks really loud. It does, Lena agreed, something in her chest cracking open. The wind here has opinions. What's it say? Right now? I think it's saying this is the strangest afternoon I've had in 5 years. Dante's expression flickered with something that might have been hope. Strange good or strange bad? Lena looked at him, then at Nico, then at the life she'd built that had suddenly become infinitely more complicated and possibly, terrifyingly, more real. Ask me again tomorrow, she said softly, or the day after. Or maybe next week. Ask me 100 times and maybe I'll find an answer. Dante nodded slowly. I can work with maybe. And sitting there in a Chicago cafe with cheap hot chocolate and dinosaur cookies, watching this man who'd broken her heart try to piece together something honest while his son made sound effects for Rex's cookie consumption, Lena felt the first dangerous flutter of hope. It was terrifying. But she didn't run. This time, she stayed. The next 3 weeks unfolded in careful increments, like learning to walk on ice, each step deliberate, testing whether the surface would hold or crack beneath the weight of what they were attempting to build. Dante rented a house in Logan Square, close enough to Lena's apartment to be accessible, but far enough to feel separate. It was a 3-bedroom brick home with a fenced yard where Nico could play. Nothing like the Manhattan penthouse she'd never seen but had always imagined. This house had scuffed hardwood floors and a kitchen with outdated appliances, the kind of normal that felt intentional. I wanted something that felt like a home instead of a fortress, Dante explained the first time Lena saw it, Nico already racing through rooms with Rex held aloft like a flag. It's nice, Lena said, meaning it. The house had warmth, lived-in comfort that stood in stark contrast to everything she'd associated with Dante's world. They established a rhythm. Dante would text in the morning, always asking, never demanding. Nico wants to know if you're free for the playground today. No pressure. Or, we're making dinner. Nothing fancy. Would you like to join us? At first, Lena said no more often than yes. She needed space to process, to protect herself from falling too fast into the gravitational pull of their orbit. But slowly, the yeses began to outnumber the NOs, and she found herself woven into the fabric of their days. Sunday mornings became farmers' market trips, Nico insisting on holding both their hands as they navigated through stalls of produce and fresh bread. Lena taught him how to pick the best apples, the same way her grandmother had taught her before everything fell apart. Dante watched these small intimacies with an expression that made Lena's chest ache, like he was memorizing proof that gentle things could still exist in his world. Wednesday evenings were park visits, where Nico would play while Dante and Lena sat on benches and talked. Really talked, in ways they never had before. He told her about the years after she'd left, the grinding loneliness of his marriage, the terror of Catherine's pregnancy complications, the moment he'd held Nico for the first time and realized he'd built an empire but had no idea how to love someone without conditions. I kept thinking about what you'd said, Dante admitted one evening while Nico dug in the sandbox. That I made you feel seen. I'd never understood how powerful that was until I became invisible to myself. I'd created this persona, the untouchable boss, the strategic mind, the man who didn't bend. And somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten there was a person underneath all that performance. What changed? Lena asked, genuinely curious. Nico. About 6 months after Catherine died, he looked at me during breakfast and said, Papa, are you real or pretend? I asked him what he meant, and he said I felt like the pictures in his storybooks, like someone drew me but I wasn't actually there. Lena's throat tightened. He said that at 2.5? He's always been unsettlingly perceptive. Dante's smile was sad. But he was right. I'd been going through the motions of fatherhood without actually being present. I was protecting him, providing for him, but I wasn't letting him see me, just like I'd never let anyone see me, except you. I'm not sure what I saw was real either. We were both performing, you the powerful protector, me the grateful secret. Maybe. But there were moments when the performance slipped, when we were just two people trying to figure out how to be less alone. He turned to face her fully. I want to find those moments again. Without the lies this time. Without the hiding. It was comments like that, honest and undefended, that made it harder for Lena to maintain her protective distance. This version of Dante was different from the man she'd loved in Manhattan. That Dante had been controlled, measured, always calculating 3 moves ahead. This Dante was raw in a way that suggested loss had scraped away some essential layer of armor, leaving him vulnerable in ways that clearly terrified him. She saw it in how he was with Nico. The way he'd drop everything when his son needed him, the patience he'd never shown in their stolen moments together, the willingness to be silly and undignified if it made the boy laugh. Fatherhood had taught him something about surrendering control, and it showed in every interaction. Friday nights became movie nights at Dante's house. Nico would pick increasingly ridiculous animated films, curled between them on the couch, with Rex and a bowl of popcorn. The first time the boy fell asleep with his head on Lena's lap, she'd frozen, unsure what to do. Dante had simply smiled and whispered, "He trusts you. That's not something he gives easily." Lena had stroked Nico's hair with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of that trust settle into her bones. When Dante carried the sleeping child to bed, she'd stood in the doorway watching him tuck Nico in, listening to the soft words he murmured, promises to keep him safe, assurances that he was loved, gentle, good-night wishes. Then Dante had noticed her watching, and his expression had cracked open with such naked longing that Lena had to look away. "I should go," she'd said, gathering her things, "or you could stay." Dante's voice was careful. "Just to talk. I'm not asking for anything else." She'd stayed. They'd talked until 2 in the morning, drinking bad coffee, and finally addressing the elephant that had been growing larger with each passing day. "I'm terrified," Lena admitted, curled into the corner of his couch, "of doing this wrong, of hurting Nico, of falling back into the pattern where I disappear myself to fit into your life." "I'm terrified too," Dante said quietly, "of asking too much, of not being enough, of proving that I haven't actually changed as much as I think I have." "Where does that leave us?" "Honest, maybe, for the first time." He'd set his coffee down, his hands restless. "I need to tell you something. About my work." Lena's stomach dropped. "Okay." "When Catherine died, it forced me to look at what I'd built. The organization, the power structure, the empire that demanded loyalty through fear. I'd always told myself it was necessary, that there were rules and codes that made it acceptable. But watching my son grow up, knowing he'd inherit this world," Dante's jaw tightened. "I couldn't reconcile being the father I wanted to be with being the man my position required." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've been systematically dismantling everything. Transitioning legitimate businesses into actual legitimate operations, cutting ties with the parts that can't be cleaned, restructuring power so it doesn't all flow through me. It's slow work. You can't just walk away from what I was without consequences. But I'm doing it." Lena stared at him. "That's incredibly dangerous." "I know. That's why I have security, why I'm careful about where Nico goes, why I'm asking you to be part of this, knowing there are risks." He met her eyes. "I won't lie and say it's safe, but I'm trying to build something different, something where my son doesn't have to choose between power and goodness." "And if you can't? If the world you built won't let you go? Then I'll do whatever it takes to protect Nico. And you, if you'll let me." The declaration should have felt romantic. Instead, it felt heavy with the reality of what loving Dante Romano meant, the constant awareness of danger, the knowledge that his past had teeth and might bite back, the understanding that choosing him meant choosing complexity and risk. "I need time," Lena had said, "to think about whether I can live with that." "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." That had been a week ago. Since then, Lena had been wrestling with the question of what she actually wanted versus what she thought she should want. The safe choice would be to walk away, to protect herself and let Dante figure out his transformation without pulling her into the undertow. But every time she considered it, she thought about Nico's laugh and Dante's careful vulnerability and the way it felt to be part of something that resembled family. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Lena was at the clinic when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Years of instinct made her step into the supply closet before answering. "Lena Marquez." The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Victoria Chen. I'm an attorney representing certain parties who are concerned about your relationship with Dante Romano." Ice flooded Lena's veins. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please don't insult my intelligence. You've been seen with Mr. Romano and his son multiple times over the past 3 weeks. I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that your involvement puts you in a vulnerable position." "Is that a threat?" "It's information. Mr. Romano is attempting to exit certain business arrangements. Not everyone is pleased with this decision. Leverage comes in many forms, and right now you and the child represent significant leverage." Lena's hand tightened on the phone. "If you're trying to scare me away from Dante, I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're walking into. Mr. Romano has enemies who won't hesitate to use whatever weakness they can find. 5 years ago, you were smart enough to disappear, Consider whether you want to make yourself visible again." The line went dead. Lena stood in the supply closet, her heart hammering, the familiar weight of fear pressing against her chest. This was it. The reality check she'd been half expecting since Dante showed up. His world had teeth, and now those teeth were turning toward her. She should run, should pack her bags and disappear again, this time making sure no one could follow. It's what the old Lena would have done, the woman who'd perfected the art of survival through invisibility. But something had shifted in the past 3 weeks. She thought about Nico asking if she was going to make his papa happy again, about Dante's honesty, his willingness to dismantle everything he'd built for a chance at something real, about the version of herself she'd become in Chicago, stronger, more solid, less willing to let fear make all her decisions. Lena left the clinic early, her mind racing through options. When she reached Dante's house, she found him in the kitchen making dinner while Nico colored at the table. The domestic scene was so normal it made her chest ache. "Lena!" Nico scrambled down from his chair, running to hug her legs. "Papa's making spaghetti, and it smells like Christmas." "Christmas smells like cookies," Dante said, amused, "but also like happy, and spaghetti smells happy too." Lena forced a smile, hugging the boy back. "That's very good logic." Dante caught her expression immediately. His posture shifted, awareness sharpening. "Nico, buddy, why don't you go play with Rex in the living room for a few minutes? Lena and I need to talk about grown-up stuff." "Is it the complicated kind or the hard kind?" "Maybe both," Lena said softly. Nico looked between them with that too-knowing gaze, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, but you should hold hands. That's what helps when things are hard." He left, and Dante immediately moved closer. "What happened?" Lena told him about the call, watching his expression darken with each word. When she finished, he was gripping the counter with white knuckles, fury barely contained beneath his controlled exterior. "Victoria Chen is one of the attorneys for the Castellano family. They're not happy about me pulling out of our partnership." His voice was deadly calm. "I'll handle this." "How?" "By threatening them back? By proving you're still the dangerous man they remember?" Lena shook her head. "That's not handling it, Dante. That's just perpetuating the cycle." "Then what do you suggest? They threatened you. They know about Nico. I can't just—" "I know you can't. But I need to know, and I need you to be completely honest. Is this ever going to end? Will there ever be a day when you're fully free of this world, or will we always be looking over our shoulders?" Dante's expression cracked. "I don't know. I'm trying to create that day, but I can't guarantee it, and I hate that I can't give you the promise you deserve." "That's not what I'm asking for." Lena stepped closer. "I'm asking if you're truly committed to trying. Not for me, not even for Nico, but because it's the right thing to do." "Yes, absolutely yes." "Then here's what I need. I need you to be honest with me about the risks. All of them. No protection through ignorance, no keeping me in the dark for my own good. If I'm going to choose this, choose you and Nico. I need to know what I'm choosing." Dante studied her for a long moment. "You're not running. I ran once. It didn't solve anything. It just meant I was alone while I hurt instead of with people who mattered." Lena's voice steadied. "I'm tired of running, Dante. I'm tired of letting fear make me small. So either we face this together, completely honest about the dangers and the complications, or we end it now before Nico gets any more attached." Something fundamental shifted in Dante's expression, relief and terror and gratitude all tangled together. Together then. Complete honesty. "Starting now. Tell me everything. The business you're leaving, the people who are angry about it, what the actual risks are. All of it." They talked for 3 hours. Dante laid out the full complexity of his world, the legitimate businesses he'd built alongside the illegitimate ones, the power structures he'd been part of since his 20s, the slow, dangerous process of extracting himself without getting killed or arrested. He didn't soften it, didn't try to make himself look better. He just told her the truth. Lena listened, asked questions, made him clarify the parts he tried to gloss over. By the time he finished, she had a clear picture of exactly how complicated loving him would be. "I'm keeping Nico out of it as much as possible," Dante said, exhaustion evident in his voice. "The house is secure, I have people I trust watching him when I can't, and I'm careful about his routine. But they're right that he's leverage, that you both are. So we make ourselves less valuable as leverage," Lena said. "How?" "By not being secret, by being so visible that hurting either of us would bring attention they don't want. She was thinking out loud, puzzle pieces clicking together. They called because they think you still operate like you used to, through shadows and hidden things. What if we do the opposite? Dante's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You're suggesting we make our relationship public. I'm suggesting we live like we have nothing to hide. Take Nico to normal places, be seen together, make it clear I'm not some weakness that can be exploited quietly. Make hurting me or him more trouble than it's worth. That's risky in its own way. Everything about this is risky, but I'd rather be at risk while actually living than safe and alone. Lena met his gaze. I love you. I never stopped even when I hated myself for it, and I love Nico, which terrifies me because he's not mine to love. But if we're doing this, if we're actually trying to build something real, then I need to be all in. Not hidden, not secret, just in. Dante crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that belied the intensity in his eyes. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you sat down at table 12 and let me see you. And I'm all in too, completely. When he kissed her, it felt different than the desperate passion of their Manhattan years. This kiss held promise instead of urgency, foundation instead of stolen moments. It tasted like possibility and truth, and the terrifying hope that maybe, this time, they could build something that lasted. A small sound from the doorway made them break apart. Nico stood there, Rex dangling from one hand, his expression caught between confusion and cautious joy. Are you kissing because you're happy or because you're sad? He asked. Lena crouched down to his level, Dante's hand steady on her shoulder. Happy, sweetheart. Definitely happy. Does this mean you're going to stay now? The question held such fragile hope that Lena felt tears sting her eyes. I'm going to try really hard to stay. Is that okay with you? Nico studied her with that unnerving intensity, then nodded slowly. Okay, but you have to promise something. What? If you need to leave, you have to say goodbye first. Not like my mama. She didn't get to say goodbye. The words landed like a blow. Lena glanced up at Dante, saw the same pain reflected in his expression. She looked back at Nico and made the only promise she could. I promise that if I ever have to leave, I'll always say goodbye. And I'll always tell you the truth about why. Nico considered this, then walked forward and wrapped his small arms around her neck. Okay, you can stay then. Over the boy's shoulder, Lena met Dante's eyes. This was the moment, the real commitment, spoken in a child's straightforward terms. Stay or go. Choose the complicated, dangerous, beautiful mess of this family, or walk away to safety. Lena held Nico tighter and chose to stay. The following days brought tangible changes. Dante introduced Lena to his security team, made sure she understood the protocols, gave her phone numbers to call if anything felt wrong. They established rhythms that included all 3 of them. School drop-offs where Lena came along, weekend trips to the Children's Museum, dinners where Nico would chatter about his day while Dante and Lena exchanged glances that held entire conversations. Slowly, carefully, they began to look like a family. But the question Lena had asked in the park still hung between them, unresolved. One night after Nico was asleep, she finally voiced it. They were sitting on the back porch, Chicago's November chill requiring blankets and proximity. Dante had his arm around her shoulders, and for a moment everything felt perfect and possible. If your wife hadn't died, Lena said quietly, would you have ever come for me? She felt Dante stiffen, felt him want to give the easy answer. To his credit, he didn't. I don't know, he said finally, the honesty rough in his throat. I want to say yes. I want to believe I would have eventually found the courage to choose you. But the truth is, I don't know if I would have. Catherine's death forced my hand, forced me to confront what I'd been avoiding. Without that catalyst, he paused. I might have spent my whole life loving you from a distance and calling it honor. The answer hurt worse than any lie would have. But it was the truth, and they'd promised each other truth. Thank you for saying that, Lena whispered. Does it change anything between us? She thought about it, really thought, sitting in the cold dark with this man who'd broken her heart and was now trying to piece it back together with careful honesty. It changes what we're building. We're not trying to resurrect what we had. We're creating something new, something that isn't built on secrets and stolen time. Dante pulled her closer. Something real. Something terrifying, Lena corrected, but real. They sat in silence, watching Chicago lights blur in the distance. Somewhere inside, Nico slept, trusting them to keep him safe and loved. Somewhere out in the city, people with agendas and anger plotted their next moves. And somewhere in Lena's chest, hope and fear tangled together in equal measure. "I need to ask you something," Dante said, "and I need you to answer honestly. Okay? Can you forgive me? Not forget, not pretend the past didn't happen, but actually forgive me for choosing wrong 5 years ago?" Lena turned to look at him fully. In the porch light, she could see the vulnerability in his expression, the genuine fear that she might say no. "I think forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's something I'll have to choose every day. Some days will be easier than others." She touched his face. "But yes, I can forgive you. I think I already have, at least partially. The rest will come with time." Dante's exhale was shaky with relief. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning that forgiveness." "Don't spend your life earning anything. Just spend it being present, being honest, being the man Nico thinks you are, and the man I'm learning you can be." "I can do that." "Then that's enough." They went inside together, checked on Nico one more time, and stood in the doorway of his room watching him sleep. The boy was sprawled across his bed, Rex tucked under one arm, completely at peace in a way only children could manage. "He asked me yesterday if you were going to be his new mama," Dante said softly. Lena's breath caught. "What did you tell him?" "That it was up to you, but I hope so. Was that okay?" "It's terrifying, but yes, it's okay." She leaned against Dante's shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this. A family. A child to love. Someone who chose me knowing all my broken parts. You're not broken. You're someone who survived being broken and became stronger in the mended places." Lena thought about the woman who'd boarded a train 5 years ago, running from pain with nothing but survival instinct and fear. She thought about the woman standing here now, choosing to stay despite the risks, choosing to love despite the scars. "We're all a little broken," she said. "Maybe that's what makes us fit together." Dante kissed the top of her head. "Maybe so." They stood there a while longer, watching Nico sleep, feeling the weight and wonder of what they were building. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was real in a way their Manhattan years had never been. And for now, real was enough. The first real test came 3 weeks later, on a morning that started ordinary and ended with everything nearly falling apart. Lena had moved some of her things into Dante's house gradually, a drawer here, a toothbrush there, the kind of slow integration that let Nico adjust without overwhelming him. She still kept her apartment, partly for the illusion of independence, partly because some protective instinct told her to maintain an escape route, but most nights found her in Dante's bed, talking until late about everything and nothing, learning the rhythms of his breathing, the weight of his arm around her waist. That morning, she was making pancakes while Dante got Nico ready for preschool. The domestic routine felt surreal and perfect, the kind of normal she'd stopped believing she could have. "Lena, can you make mine look like a dinosaur?" Nico called from upstairs. "I can try, but it might look more like a blob with legs." "That's okay, blobs need love too." She was laughing, spatula in hand, when the kitchen window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the counter, across her arms, tiny cuts blooming red before she fully processed what had happened. A brick landed on the floor, wrapped in paper. Instinct made her drop to the ground, heart hammering, the pancakes smoking on the griddle forgotten. Dante was downstairs in seconds. Nico clutched to his chest, his expression locked into the cold fury she remembered from another life. He set the boy down in the hallway, barking orders into his phone in a tone that brooked no argument, then crossed to Lena. "Are you hurt?" His hands were already checking her over, cataloging cuts, his touch clinical despite the rage burning in his eyes. "I'm okay. Just, what was that?" Dante picked up the brick, unfolded the paper with controlled movements. His jaw clenched as he read, then he crumpled it in his fist. "What does it say?" Lena asked, even though part of her didn't want to know. "It says to remember that windows aren't the only things that can break." He pulled out his phone again. "I'm calling Marcus. We're moving you and Nico to a safe house until—" "No." Lena stood, brushing glass from her clothes with shaking hands. "We're not running. We talked about this. Being visible, being public, That was before someone threw a brick through my window while you were standing there. Dante's voice was lethal. This is different. This is exactly what we expected. They're testing us, trying to make us scared enough to hide. She met his eyes, forcing steel into her voice, despite the adrenaline making her limbs tremble. If we hide now, we give them power. We prove they can control us. Lena? Papa? Nico's small voice cut through the tension. He stood in the hallway, Rex clutched tight, his eyes too wide. Why is there glass everywhere? Did something bad happen? Dante's expression shifted immediately, the cold fury melting into something gentler. He crossed to his son and knelt down. Someone threw a rock through our window. It was mean and scary, but everyone's okay. Was it because of the bad people you used to know? The question was so direct, so knowing, that both adults froze. Dante had been honest with Nico about his past in age-appropriate terms, explaining that he'd made mistakes, that some people were angry about changes he was making, that they had to be careful. But hearing the boy connect those conversations to this moment drove home how much Nico understood. Yes, buddy, but we're safe. I promise. Nico looked past his father to Lena, who was picking glass out of her hair. Is Lena safe too? I'm okay, sweetheart, Lena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Just a little glass. Nothing serious. The boy studied them both with that unsettling perception, then walked over to Lena and hugged her legs. You promised you'd say goodbye if you had to leave. Are you leaving? The question cracked something in Lena's chest. She knelt down, ignoring the glass biting into her knees, and took Nico's face in her hands. I promised I would tell you if I had to leave. But I'm not leaving. Do you understand? This scared me, but I'm not going anywhere. Even though it's dangerous? Even though. Because you and your papa are worth staying for. Nico seemed to accept this, then turned to Dante. Can we still have pancakes? Lena was making me a dinosaur one. The absurdity of the request, pancakes while glass littered the kitchen floor, almost made Lena laugh. But Dante just nodded, his expression softening. Yeah, buddy, we can still have pancakes. Why don't you go play in the living room while I clean this up? After Nico left, Lena and Dante worked in tense silence. He swept glass while she salvaged what breakfast she could, both hyper-aware of how close the brick had come, how easily this could have been worse. I need to respond to this, Dante said finally, dumping glass into the trash. Not with violence, but with clarity. They need to understand that threatening you is a line they don't cross. How do you make that clear without escalating? I have a meeting with Castellano tomorrow. It was already scheduled. We've been negotiating terms for my exit from our partnership. I'll make sure he understands that any action against you or Nico will have consequences he won't like. Lena touched his arm. What kind of consequences? The kind that don't involve anyone getting hurt, but that make his business operations significantly more difficult. I still have leverage, Lena. I just don't use it the same way I used to. She wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way, but she also understood the reality of Dante's world, that sometimes the only language certain people spoke was power, and pretending otherwise just made you vulnerable. Okay, but I'm coming with you. Dante turned to stare at her. Absolutely not. You said we were doing this together. That means I don't sit at home wondering what's happening while you negotiate with people who just threaten me. It's too dangerous. So is standing in your kitchen, apparently. Lena's voice hardened. I'm not asking permission, Dante. Either we're partners in this or we're not. Which is it? The tension stretched between them, Dante clearly wrestling with the protective instincts that had defined most of his adult life. Finally, he exhaled slowly. Fine, but you follow my lead in the meeting, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments. I can agree to that. The rest of the day passed in heightened awareness. Security installed a temporary board over the broken window and swept the house for other vulnerabilities. Dante made calls, his voice dropping into the clipped authority Lena recognized from their Manhattan days, the man who commanded empires and expected obedience. That night, after Nico was asleep, they lay in bed not touching, both too wired to relax. I'm sorry, Dante said into the darkness. This is exactly what you were afraid of. My past putting you in danger. I was afraid of being someone's secret again, Lena corrected. of disappearing myself to fit into your life. This is different. This is choosing to stand beside you even when it's hard. You could still leave. I'd understand. I'd hate it, but I'd understand. Lena rolled over to face him, finding his eyes in the dim light from the hallway. I ran once. It didn't make me safer or happier. It just made me alone. At least now, if I'm scared with people I love. I love you, Dante said, the words rough with emotion. I know I say it too much, but I need you to hear it, especially now. I love you too. Even when you're being overprotective and dictatorial. His laugh was surprised and genuine. Dictatorial. You literally told me you'd understand if I left, like you get to decide what's acceptable for me to tolerate. I'm a grown woman, Dante. I can assess my own risks. You're right. I'm sorry. Old habits. I know. We're both learning. She touched his face. But we learn together, okay? No more lone wolf protecting everyone by making decisions for them. Together, he agreed, even when it terrifies me. They fell asleep tangled together, and if both of them startled awake at small sounds throughout the night, neither mentioned it. The meeting with Anthony Castellano took place in a restaurant on the north side, the kind of establishment that looked unremarkable from the outside but screened its clientele carefully. Lena dressed simply but well, channeling every ounce of confidence she could muster despite the nerves making her hands shake. You don't have to prove anything, Dante said in the car. Just being there is enough. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to understand the world you're leaving so I know what we're up against. Marcus, Dante's head of security, drove them personally. He'd been briefed on Lena's insistence on attending and had accepted it with the kind of resigned professionalism that suggested he'd learned not to argue with Dante's decisions. The restaurant was elegant and quiet, the kind of place where conversations happened in low tones and everyone pretended not to notice everyone else. Anthony Castellano sat at a corner booth, flanked by two men who radiated controlled violence. He was in his 60s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of presence that came from decades of commanding fear. Dante's hand was steady on Lena's back as they approached. She felt every eye in the restaurant track their movement, assessing, calculating. Anthony, Dante said, his tone neutral. Thank you for making time. Dante, and you've brought a guest. Castellano's eyes raked over Lena with clinical interest. How unexpected. Lena Marquez, my partner. Dante's introduction was deliberate, claiming her publicly in a way that made the stakes crystal clear. They sat. Coffee appeared without being ordered. The pleasantries were brief and meaningless, everyone waiting for the real conversation to begin. I received your message about the brick, Castellano said, stirring sugar into his espresso. Unfortunate business. Rogue elements, I'm sure. We both know there's nothing rogue about it, Dante replied evenly. The message was clear. I'm here to make my response equally clear. And that response is? My exit from our partnership is non-negotiable. I've offered fair terms for the transition. More than fair, considering I could simply walk away and let the consequences fall where they may. But if there are any further actions against my family, he let the word hang deliberately. Then those generous terms disappear and things become much more difficult for everyone involved. Castellano's smile didn't reach his eyes. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Dante. I thought you were trying to leave that life behind. I am, but leaving doesn't mean forgetting how to operate when necessary. Dante's voice dropped into something colder. You have 48 hours to accept my terms, or I start making calls to very interested parties about certain accounting irregularities in your legitimate operations. I believe the IRS would be fascinated by some of the discrepancies I could point them toward. You'd risk exposure yourself. I'm already exposed. I'm pivoting everything toward legitimate business, which means I have lawyers and accountants ensuring my operations can withstand scrutiny. Can you say the same? Dante leaned forward slightly. I don't want war, Anthony. I want a clean break. But if you force my hand, I will protect what's mine. Castellano's attention shifted to Lena. And you? You understand what you're involving yourself in? Lena met his gaze without flinching, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. I understand that people who threaten children and throw bricks through windows are cowards. I understand that Dante is building something better than what he's leaving behind. And I understand that I'm not going anywhere. Something flickered in Castellano's expression, surprise maybe, or reassessment. He studied her for a long moment before turning back to Dante. She's got more spine than Catherine ever did. I'll give you that. The casual mention of Dante's dead wife made Lena's stomach turn, but Dante's expression didn't change. 48 hours, Anthony. Accept the terms or face the consequences. Your choice. They left without ordering food, Marcus materializing immediately to escort them out. Lena didn't breathe properly until they were in the car, blocks away, Chicago streets blurring past. You did well, Dante said quietly. Better than well. You didn't flinch. I was terrified. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. He took her hand. But I need you to understand. This might not be over. Castellano doesn't like being backed into corners. So what happens in 48 hours? Either he accepts the terms and we move forward, or things get complicated. Dante's jaw tightened. If it's the latter, I'm sending you and Nico somewhere safe until it's resolved. Dante, this isn't negotiable, Lena. Standing up to Castellano in a public restaurant is one thing. Being in the line of fire if he decides to escalate is another. I won't risk you or Nico that way. She wanted to argue, but looking at his expression, the fear beneath the control, she understood this was the line he couldn't cross. Protecting them was fundamental to who he was, and asking him to compromise on their safety was asking too much. Okay, she said, but only if things escalate. If he accepts the terms, we stay and we build the life we talked about. Deal. The 48 hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Dante increased security around the house, made arrangements for potential evacuation, and generally existed in a state of controlled tension that reminded Lena too much of the guarded man she'd known in Manhattan. Nico picked up on the stress, becoming clingy and anxious. He insisted on sleeping in Dante's bed, wedged between his father and Lena, as if proximity could keep the scary things at bay. Neither adult had the heart to refuse him. Is the bad stuff going to happen soon? Nico asked the second night, his small voice cutting through the darkness. We don't know yet, buddy, Dante said gently. We're waiting to hear. If it does happen, will you fight? Dante was quiet for a moment. Not the way I used to. I'm trying to do things differently now. Because of Lena? Because of both of you. You make me want to be better. Nico absorbed this, then rolled over to look at Lena. Are you still scared? Yes, she admitted. But I'm also brave. You can be both at the same time. That's what Papa said. Being brave means being scared, but doing the thing anyway. Your Papa's very smart. I know. He knows like a million things. Nico yawned. If the bad people come, Rex will protect us. He's very fierce when he needs to be. But Lena felt tears sting her eyes. I'm sure he is. The call came at our 46. Dante took it in his office while Lena distracted Nico with a puzzle in the living room. When he emerged 15 minutes later, his expression was carefully neutral. Well? Lena asked, her heart in her throat. He accepted the terms. With a few minor modifications, but nothing substantial. The partnership is dissolved, effective immediately. Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. It's over? This part is, there will be other challenges as I continue shifting everything legitimate, but Castellano's off the board. Dante sat down heavily, exhaustion evident. We're going to be okay. Nico looked up from his puzzle. Does that mean no more bad people throwing things? It means we're safer than we were. Not perfect, but safer. Dante pulled his son into his lap. And it means we can focus on being a family instead of looking over our shoulders all the time. Good. Because I want Lena to stay forever and I can't teach her all the important dinosaur stuff if we're busy being scared. Lena laughed, the sound slightly hysterical with relief. What important dinosaur stuff? So much stuff. Like how velociraptors were actually only this big. He held his hands apart. And they probably had feathers. And how Brachiosaurus had hearts this big to pump blood all the way up their necks. His hands spread wider, his expression serious. Really important science stuff. That does sound important, Lena agreed, catching Dante's eye over Nico's head. The look they shared held relief and hope, and the beginning of belief that maybe, finally, they could build something that lasted. That evening, after Nico was asleep, Dante and Lena sat on the back porch again. The November air was bitter, but neither wanted to go inside yet. They needed space to process, to let the adrenaline of the past few days drain away. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Lena admitted, for something else to go wrong. That's trauma talking, the waiting for disaster because disaster has always come before. Dante pulled her closer. But maybe we get to be boring now. Maybe the most exciting thing that happens is Nico's science projects and deciding what to have for dinner. I don't know if I remember how to be boring. We'll learn together. They sat in silence for a while, watching their breath fog in the cold air. Finally, Lena asked the question that had been building in her chest for weeks. When Nico asked if I was going to be his new mama, what do you want the answer to be? Dante turned to look at her fully. I want you to be his mother in every way that matters. I want to make this official, legal, permanent. I want to marry you, Lena, not because we need to, not to solve a problem, but because I choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. Her breath caught. You're proposing? Not yet. Not officially. I want to do it right this time. Actually plan it, make it special. Ask when you're ready to say yes instead of when you feel obligated. He touched her face. But I'm telling you my intention. So you know where this is heading, if you'll have me. Lena felt tears streak down her cold cheeks. I ran away from you once. I rebuilt my entire life to survive losing you. And now you're sitting here telling me you want forever. I know it's a lot to ask. It's everything I wanted 5 years ago and convinced myself I'd never have. She kissed him, tasting salt and hope and the promise of all the ordinary, beautiful days ahead. Yes, not to the proposal you haven't made yet, but yes to the intention. Yes to building something permanent. Yes to being Nico's mother and your wife and choosing this complicated, messy, wonderful life. Dante's expression cracked open with relief and joy. Yeah? Yeah, but I have conditions. Name them. We tell Nico together. We make sure he's part of this decision, that he wants me to be his mother officially before we make it legal. Agreed. What else? No more secrets. If something scares you or threatens us, you tell me immediately. We face it together. I can do that. And when you propose, actually propose, do it somewhere meaningful. Not grand or expensive, just real. Dante smiled, genuine and unguarded. I think I can manage that. They went inside together, checked on Nico one more time, and climbed into bed. For the first time in weeks, neither of them startled at shadows or sounds. They just held each other, feeling the solid reality of what they were building. Thank you, Dante said into the darkness. For what? For staying. For being brave enough to give me another chance. For loving my son. For making me believe I could be someone better. Lena threaded her fingers through his. Thank you for coming to Chicago, for being honest, for showing me that running away doesn't solve anything, but standing still and choosing to fight for what matters does. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. And wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a house becoming a home, they let themselves believe in forever. The conversation with Nico happened on a Sunday morning in December. Snow falling soft and steady outside the kitchen windows. Lena was making hot chocolate while Dante assembled a complicated dinosaur model at the table, Nico supervising with the gravity of a construction foreman. No, Papa, the tail goes the other way. See? Otherwise he'd fall over. You're absolutely right. Good catch, buddy. Lena set 3 mugs on the table, the rich chocolate smell filling the kitchen. This house had become home in ways she'd stopped believing possible. The creaky floorboard on the stairs, the way afternoon light hit the living room just right, the sounds of Dante and Nico's morning routine that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Nico, can we talk to you about something important? Dante asked, setting down the model pieces. The boy looked between them with that too perceptive gaze. Is it the complicated kind or the hard kind? Maybe a little of both, Lena said, sitting down, but also the good kind. Nico climbed into the chair between them, Rex positioned carefully on the table as witness. Okay, I'm ready. Dante glanced at Lena, and she nodded. They'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, wanting to get it right. You know how much Lena means to both of us, right? Dante began. How she's been part of our family for a while now. Yeah, She lives here and makes the good pancakes and knows all the library books, and she doesn't leave even when stuff is scary. Nico recited this like a list of facts, each one essential. Exactly. And because she's such an important part of our family, your papa and I want to make it official, legal, so that we're a real family on paper, not just in our hearts. Nico's brow furrowed. Like marriage? Yes, Dante said. I want to ask Lena to marry me. But before I do, I need to know how you feel about that, because this isn't just about me and Lena, it's about all three of us. The boy was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he turned to Lena with startling directness. If you marry Papa, does that make you my mama? Lena's throat tightened. It would make me your stepmother, legally, but what I am to you, that's something you get to decide. I'll never try to replace your first mama. She'll always be your mother, always be important and remembered. But if you want, I could be a different kind of mama, the one who's here now. Can I have two mamas? One who's in heaven and one who makes pancakes? The question broke something open in Lena's chest. Yes, sweetheart, you can absolutely have both. Nico seemed to accept this, then looked at Dante. Would you be happy if you married Lena? Very happy. The happiest I've been in a long time. Would Lena be happy? I hope so, Lena said softly. Your papa makes me very happy, and so do you. Nico picked up Rex, held the dinosaur close while he thought. The adults waited, giving him space to process without pressure. Finally, he set Rex down and nodded decisively. Okay, you can get married, but I have conditions. Despite the gravity of the moment, both Dante and Lena had to suppress smiles at the 3-year-old's serious tone. What are your conditions? Dante asked. First, I get to be in the wedding, like really in it, not just watching. Absolutely. You'll be the most important person there besides me and Lena. Second, Rex gets to come too. Rex is definitely invited. Third, Nico looked at Lena. You have to promise again about saying goodbye. Because if you're going to be my real mama, I need to know you won't just disappear like she did. The words landed with devastating honesty. Lena reached across the table and took Nico's small hands in hers. I promise, I will never leave without saying goodbye. And more than that, I promise to stay. To be here for birthdays and bad days and boring days and every day in between. To be your mama in all the ways that matter, okay? Nico studied her face for what felt like an eternity, then nodded. Okay. Then I say yes. You can marry Papa. Dante exhaled shakily, clearly fighting tears. Thank you, buddy. That means everything. Can we finish the dinosaur now? He's been waiting very patiently. They finished the model together, Nico's chatter filling the space where heavier emotions had been. But Lena caught Dante's eye over the boy's head, and the look they shared held promise and relief, and the bone-deep certainty that they were building something real. 3 weeks later, on a frigid January evening, Dante took Lena back to Palmer Square Park, the same bench where they'd had their first real conversation in Chicago, where Nico had asked why they talked in sad voices, where everything had tentatively begun. The park was empty, too cold for anyone but the desperately determined. Dante had arranged for Marcus to watch Nico, claiming he needed to discuss business with Lena. The boy had seen right through the excuse but had magnanimously agreed to the deception. It's freezing, Lena said, her breath fogging white. What are we doing here? You said when I proposed it should be somewhere meaningful, not grand or expensive, just real. Dante turned to face her, and even in the dim streetlight she could see the vulnerability in his expression. This is where you chose to stay, where you could have told me to disappear but gave me a chance instead, where we started building something honest. Lena's heart began to race. Dante. He dropped to one knee on the frozen ground, pulling a small box from his coat pocket. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Hurt people I loved, chosen wrong when I knew better, built an empire on things I'm not proud of. But finding you, losing you, and somehow being given the chance to find you again, that feels like the universe giving me one opportunity to get something right. Tears were already streaming down Lena's face, freezing in the Chicago wind. I don't deserve you, Dante continued, his voice rough with emotion. I don't deserve the grace you've shown me, or the love you give my son, or the way you've made our house feel like a home. But I'm asking anyway. Lena Marquez, Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love doesn't have to be another form of control, that family can be chosen and real, that two broken people can build something beautiful? He opened the box. The ring was simple, a single diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. Exactly right. Yes, Lena said through tears and laughter. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to everything. Dante stood and slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like snow and promise and the future they were choosing together. When they broke apart, both were crying, both were smiling, both were holding on like they'd finally found the thing worth never letting go. I love you, Dante said. I've loved you since table 12, and I'll love you until I stop breathing. I love you too, even though you proposed in 20-degree weather and my face is literally freezing. His laugh was bright and genuine. We should probably get inside before we get frostbite. Probably, but this was perfect, exactly right. They walked back to the car hand in hand, and Lena couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger, this tangible symbol of everything they'd fought through to get here. When they arrived home, Nico was supposedly asleep, but immediately appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, Rex dangling from one hand. Did she say yes? He called down, clearly having waited up despite Marcus's best efforts. She said yes, Dante called back. Nico pumped his fist in the air. Yes, I'm going to have a real mama. Then he paused. Can we have cake to celebrate? It's 9 o'clock at night, Lena pointed out. But it's a special occasion. Special occasions need cake. Dante looked at Lena, eyebrows raised in question. She shrugged, already moving toward the kitchen. Special occasions absolutely need cake. They ate chocolate cake at the kitchen table, Dante, Lena, Nico, and Rex, while snow continued to fall outside and the radiators clanked their familiar rhythm. It was ordinary and perfect, and Lena felt the full weight of how far they'd all come. When's the wedding? Nico asked around a mouthful of cake. We haven't planned that far yet, Dante said. What do you think? Big wedding or small? Small, just people who really matter, and dinosaurs. I don't know if we can arrange actual dinosaurs. No, like dinosaur decorations. Because if it's important to me and important to Lena and important to you, then dinosaurs should be there. That's fair. Lena exchanged glances with Dante, both fighting smiles. That's very logical. We'll make sure there are dinosaurs. And can I walk Lena down the aisle? I saw that in a movie once. I think that's traditionally the father's job, Dante said gently. Nico's face fell slightly. But Lena doesn't have a papa. She said he left when she was little. The observation was so matter-of-fact, so innocent, but it hit Lena like a fist to the chest. She'd mentioned her father once in passing, and Nico had remembered. You know what? Lena said, her voice thick. I think having you walk me down the aisle would be perfect, if you want to. Nico's face lit up. Really? I get to? Really? You and Rex both. This is the best day ever. Nico took another bite of cake, completely unaware of how his simple request had given Lena a gift she didn't know she needed, the chance to be given away by someone who'd chosen to love her, who'd accepted her into his family with the pure honesty of childhood. That night, after Nico was finally asleep and the kitchen was cleaned and the world was quiet, Dante and Lena lay in bed talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. Spring wedding? Dante suggested. Give us time to plan, but not so long we're waiting forever. Spring sounds perfect, small, like Nico said, just close friends and family. I don't have much family, a few cousins I barely talk to. I have even less. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we build our own family, the people who've chosen to be part of our lives rather than who we're obligated to include. Dante pulled her closer. Your friends from the clinic? Yuki and Marco for sure. Dr. Chen? Maybe a few others. Lena paused. What about your business associates? The legitimate ones? A few. Most of the relationships from my old life are complicated at best, toxic at worst. I've been systematically cutting ties as I transition everything legitimate. He was quiet for a moment. There's something I need to tell you about the transition. Lena's stomach tightened. Okay. It's going well. Better than expected, actually. I've sold off the last of the questionable operations. restructured the real estate holdings, established clean corporations for everything else. By the time we get married, I'll be completely legitimate. No more ties to anything I'm not proud of. That's good, isn't it? Why do you sound worried? Because going legitimate means significant financial changes. I'm still wealthy by any normal standard, but not the way I was. We'll be comfortable, very comfortable, but I won't have unlimited resources anymore. Lena propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. You think I care about that? Dante, I lived on a clinic aide salary for 5 years. I'm not with you for money. I never was. I know, but I want to give you things. Security, comfort, the life you deserve. I deserve honesty and presence and love. Everything else is just details. She touched his face. Tell me the real worry, because it's not about money. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm worried that when everything illegal is gone, when I'm just a regular businessman with a past I'm trying to outrun, I won't be enough. That the man you fell in love with was powerful and dangerous and exciting, and what's left is just ordinary. Dante, look at me. She waited until his eyes met hers. The man I fell in love with saw me when I was invisible. The man I'm marrying makes dinosaur pancakes and takes his son to the park and is brave enough to dismantle an empire because it's the right thing to do. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. You're not less because you're choosing goodness. You're more. His expression cracked with relief and something deeper. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You came to Chicago. You asked instead of demanded. You let me see you, really see you, including the parts you weren't proud of. You let me choose you while being completely honest about what that choice meant. She kissed him softly. You earned me, Dante, by being brave enough to be real. They held each other in the darkness, and Lena felt the last pieces of her old fear finally dissolve. This was what she'd run from 5 years ago, not the danger or the complexity, but the vulnerability of being truly seen and choosing to stay anyway. Now, wrapped in Dante's arms with his ring on her finger and his son asleep down the hall, that vulnerability felt less like weakness and more like strength. The months between engagement and wedding passed in a blur of planning and living. Dante's legitimate business transformation continued smoothly, each severed connection to his past feeling like another weight lifted. Lena started nursing school part-time, finally allowing herself to plan for a future that extended beyond mere survival. Nico turned 4 in March with a dinosaur-themed party that took over the entire house. He told anyone who would listen that his mama was marrying his papa, and this was the best year of his whole life. The casual way he called Lena mama now still made her throat tight with grateful tears. They set the wedding for late April, in a small botanical garden on the outskirts of Chicago. 50 people maximum, just the ones who mattered. Lena's dress was simple and elegant, purchased off the rack and altered to fit. Dante's suit was new, but not ostentatious. Everything was chosen for meaning rather than display. The night before the wedding, Lena sat in her old apartment, the one she'd kept but rarely used, now serving as a getting-ready space. Yuki was there, helping her pack the last items she'd need for tomorrow, when Lena's phone rang. An unknown number. Years of instinct made her hesitate, but something made her answer anyway. Lena Marquez? A woman's voice, older, unfamiliar. Speaking. My name is Maria Romano. I'm Dante's aunt, his mother's sister. I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to call before tomorrow, to introduce myself and to tell you something important. Lena's heart raced. Okay. I haven't spoken to Dante in years. We had a falling out when he took over the family business, when he went down paths I couldn't support, but I've been keeping track of him from a distance, through mutual connections. Maria's voice softened. I heard about Catherine, about Nico, and now about you. I'm not sure what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to know that what Dante is doing, the transformation, the commitment to leaving that world behind, it's what his mother always hoped for. She died when he was young, too young, and he went looking for family in all the wrong places, found power instead of love. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow you're marrying a man who's finally found his way back to who he was supposed to be. And I wanted you to know that his mother would have loved you for giving him that path, for being brave enough to love him while he found it. You're not coming to the wedding? No? Too much history, too many complications. But I'll be thinking of you both. And Nico. Tell Dante. She paused. Tell him his mother would be proud. Not of what he was, but of what he's becoming. The line went dead before Lena could respond. She sat holding the phone, tears streaming down her face. Who was that? Yuki asked gently. A reminder that people can change, that the past doesn't have to define the future. Lena wiped her eyes. And that sometimes the family that matters most is the one we build, not the one we're born into. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, spring sunshine warming away the last of winter's chill. Lena stood in the botanical garden's small dressing room, her hands shaking as she fastened her simple pearl necklace, a gift from Dante that morning, with a note reading, "For the woman who taught me that real treasure is choosing to stay." There was a knock on the door. "Lena, can I come in?" Nico's voice. She opened the door to find him in a tiny suit, his hair carefully combed, Rex tucked under one arm. "You look beautiful," he said with perfect seriousness. "Like a princess, but also like my regular mama." Lena laughed through tears. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look very handsome." "Papa said I'm supposed to walk you down the aisle. Are you ready?" "Almost, but first I have something for you." She pulled out a small box, opened it to reveal a simple silver bracelet engraved with coordinates. "What is it?" Nico asked, examining the numbers. "Those are the exact coordinates of Palmer Square Park, the place where you, me, and your papa sat on a bench and started becoming a family. I wanted you to have something to remember that this family, our family, was something we all chose. Together." Nico's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Can you help me put it on?" She fastened it around his small wrist, then knelt down to his level. "Thank you for choosing me to be your mama. It's the greatest honor of my life." "Thank you for staying," Nico said simply. Then he took her hand. "Ready now?" The ceremony was short and perfect. 50 people who mattered, gathered in a space filled with blooming flowers and soft light. Nico walked Lena down the aisle, Rex held carefully in his free hand, his little face so proud and serious that half the guests were crying before Lena even reached Dante. And Dante, when Lena saw him waiting at the front, his expression open and vulnerable and full of love, she understood that this moment was the culmination of every choice they'd made. Every risk, every act of courage, every decision to stay when running would have been easier. The vows were traditional but felt revolutionary in their simplicity. To love and to cherish, in sickness and health, for better or worse. Words that meant everything because they'd lived through the worse and chosen the better. When Dante slid the ring onto Lena's finger, matching the engagement ring, completing the set, his voice was rough with emotion. "I choose you, today and every day, for the rest of my life." "I choose you too," Lena whispered back. "All of you, everything you were, everything you are, everything you're becoming." The officiant pronounced them married, and when Dante kissed her, the small crowd erupted in applause. Nico cheered loudest of all, jumping up and down and announcing to anyone listening, "That's my mama and papa. They're married now. We're a real family." The reception was held in the garden's greenhouse, intimate and warm. Dante and Lena had their first dance to a song about coming home, and halfway through, Nico ran onto the dance floor demanding to be included. They scooped him up between them and danced as a family, all three of them laughing and crying and holding on to each other. During the speeches, Marco from the clinic told stories about Lena's first days in Chicago, how quiet she'd been, how clearly she'd been running from something, how she'd slowly opened up and let people in. Yuki talked about watching Lena fall in love again, about the way her whole face changed when she talked about Dante and Nico. Dante's contribution was brief. He stood, Nico on his hip, and looked directly at Lena. "I spent most of my life believing power meant control, that love was just another form of possession. Then I met a woman who taught me that real strength is vulnerability, that real love is choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier. Lena, you saved me. You saved my son. You gave us both a future we didn't think we deserved. Thank you for being brave enough to give me a second chance." There wasn't a dry eye in the greenhouse. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Lena found herself on a bench outside with Dante, watching Nico chase fireflies in the garden, while Marcus kept a discreet distance. We did it, Dante said softly. We actually pulled this off. Built a family from broken pieces, Lena agreed. Who would have thought? I have something to tell you. Wedding present, kind of. Dante pulled out an envelope. I finalized the last transfer this morning. Everything is clean now, completely legitimate. Romano Holdings is officially just a real estate development and property management company. No ties to anything questionable. Dante, that's incredible. Lena took the envelope, saw the legal documents inside. How does it feel? Terrifying, liberating, right. He looked at Nico, who'd caught a firefly and was showing it to Rex with great excitement. I'm not the man I was when we met in Manhattan. I'm not even the man I was when I showed up in Chicago 6 months ago. You and Nico, you've transformed me into someone I actually want to be. You transformed yourself. We just gave you reasons to do it. No. You gave me permission to do it, to believe I could be something other than what I'd built. He turned to face her fully. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fall back into old patterns sometimes. I'm going to struggle with not being the most powerful person in the room. And I'm going to be there for all of it, the good days and the hard ones. That's what marriage means. Nico ran over, breathless and joyful. Mama, Papa, did you see? I caught 6 fireflies and let them all go. They were very thankful. That was very kind of you, buddy, Dante said, pulling his son into his lap. Can we go home now? I'm tired and Rex needs to sleep, and tomorrow can we have pancakes? Tomorrow we can have whatever you want, Lena said, stroking his hair. It's your day too, after all. They gathered their things and headed to the car, Nico chattering about fireflies and wedding cake, and how next year he wanted a dinosaur wedding for Rex and his stuffed triceratops. In the car, he fell asleep almost immediately, head against Lena's shoulder, Rex clutched to his chest. This is what I fought for, Dante said quietly, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. This exact moment, family, peace, love without conditions. You earned it, Lena said. We all did. When they got home, their home, truly theirs now, Dante carried Nico to bed while Lena changed out of her wedding dress. She hung it carefully in the closet next to Dante's suit, next to the regular clothes of their everyday life. Nothing special, just the beautiful ordinary of a family choosing each other. Later, lying in bed with Dante, Lena thought about the journey that had brought them here. The woman who'd run away 5 years ago, heartbroken and alone. The man who'd let her go because he thought it was honorable. The child who'd lost his mother but gained a family. All the broken pieces that had somehow found their way back together. I'm pregnant, Lena said into the darkness. Dante went completely still. What? I found out last week. I was going to wait until after the wedding to tell you, but I can't. I don't want to keep secrets, even good ones. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. We're having a baby. For a long moment, Dante didn't speak. When he did, his voice was thick with emotion. A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy? Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. He pulled her close, his hand still on her stomach. Terrified, overwhelmed, grateful. All of it at once. Me too. But good terrified. The kind that means something worth protecting. How far along? About 8 weeks. Early still, but healthy. She paused. We should probably tell Nico soon. He's going to have opinions about this. Dante's laugh was watery. He's going to want to teach the baby about dinosaurs before it's even born. Probably. Is that okay? Another child? I know things are still settling. Lena, stop. It's more than okay. It's perfect. You're perfect. This life we're building is perfect. He kissed her softly. Thank you. For staying. For choosing us. For making me believe in futures I thought I'd lost the right to. They fell asleep holding each other, and if both of them woke periodically to check on Nico or simply to reassure themselves this was real, neither mentioned it. The next morning they told Nico over the promised pancakes. His reaction was instantaneous and explosive. A baby. A real actual baby. That I'd get to be a big brother to. He bounced in his chair so hard it scraped across the floor. This is the best thing ever after marrying Lena and getting Rex and dinosaurs, but still really, really good. You're going to be an excellent big brother, Lena said, laughing at his enthusiasm. I know. I'll teach the baby everything. like how to use a fork, and how to build block towers, and all the dinosaur names, and which library books are the best, and how Papa makes funny faces when he's trying not to laugh, and how you always sing when you cook, and... Nico, breathe, Dante said, amused. The boy took an exaggerated breath. When does the baby come? Not for a long time. About 7 more months. That's forever. Can I tell Rex? He'll be very excited. You can tell Rex. Nico ran off to share the news with his stuffed dinosaur, leaving Dante and Lena alone in the kitchen. 7 months, Dante said wonderingly. By then, everything will be different. New business structure, new family dynamic, completely new life. Good different, Lena said firmly. The best different. He pulled her into his arms. I love you, Mrs. Romano. The name still felt new, strange and wonderful on her ears. I love you too. The months that followed were full of ordinary miracles. Lena's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing in ways that amazed and terrified her in equal measure. Dante accompanied her to every appointment, holding her hand during ultrasounds, asking the doctor 1,000 questions about keeping her safe. Nico appointed himself Chief Baby Preparation Officer, making elaborate plans for the nursery and announcing to anyone who would listen that his new sibling would definitely love dinosaurs. He drew pictures of his future role as big brother, brought Lena juice when she felt sick, and patted her growing belly while telling the baby stories about Rex's adventures. Dante's business continued to thrive in its new, completely legitimate form. He hired new staff, restructured operations, and slowly built a reputation as someone who'd walked away from a dangerous past and built something clean. The work was harder in some ways, fewer shortcuts, more regulations, actual accountability, but it was honest, and that made all the difference. One evening in late summer, with Lena 7 months pregnant and Nico asleep upstairs, they sat on the back porch watching fireflies dance through their yard. I was thinking about something, Dante said, his hand resting on Lena's belly where the baby was currently doing gymnastics. About giving back. Using what we have to help people who are where we were. What do you mean? A foundation. Something that helps people escape dangerous situations, rebuild their lives, start over. Women leaving abusive relationships, people trying to get out of criminal enterprises, kids aging out of foster care, anyone who needs a second chance. He was quiet for a moment. We know what it's like to run, to rebuild, to need someone to believe you can be more than your past. Maybe we can be that for other people. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. The Romano Foundation for Second Chances, or the Marquez Romano Foundation, equal partners in everything. I love it. I love you. I love that you want to take everything we've been through and use it to help others. We've been given so much grace, seems right to extend it forward. They sat in comfortable silence, feeling the baby move, watching their yard glow with summer light. This was what they'd fought for, not just safety or legitimacy or even love, but this exact moment of peace and purpose and family. 2 months later, on a crisp October morning, Lena gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, but Dante never left her side. And when their baby girl finally arrived, squalling and perfect, both parents wept with relief and joy. Nico met his sister that afternoon, climbing carefully onto Lena's hospital bed to peer at the tiny bundle in her arms. She's so small, he whispered, awed. Is she okay? She's perfect, Lena assured him. Want to hold her? They arranged pillows around Nico and carefully placed his sister in his arms. The boy's expression transformed into something achingly tender. Hi, baby, he said softly. I'm Nico, your big brother. I'm going to teach you everything important, okay? Like dinosaurs and how to make Papa laugh and how Mama makes everything better and how families choose each other. He looked up at Dante and Lena. What's her name? We were thinking Catherine Grace, Dante said quietly. Catherine after your first mama. Grace, because that's what brought us all together. Nico considered this seriously. That's good. But can we call her Gracie? It's friendlier. Gracie is perfect, Lena agreed. They stayed like that for a long time, Nico holding his sister, Dante and Lena on either side, all 4 of them together. A family built from broken pieces, held together by choice and courage and the revolutionary act of choosing to stay. 2 years later, Lena stood in the kitchen of their house making pancakes while chaos swirled around her. Gracie, now 2 and mobile, was systematically removing every pot from the lower cabinet. Nico, almost 7, was building an elaborate dinosaur scene on the table while explaining to Gracie exactly why velociraptors were the most interesting predators, even though they were small. "Mama, can Gracie come to my science presentation tomorrow?" Nico asked. "I'm doing it on dinosaur evolution and she should learn about science." "She's 2, sweetheart. She might not understand all of it. That's okay. I didn't understand everything when I was 2 either, but it's good to start learning early." Dante appeared in the doorway, tie already loosened though it was barely 8 in the morning. He surveyed the scene, Lena at the stove, Nico building his display, Gracie creating chaos, and his expression softened into something that still made Lena's heart catch. "Morning, beautiful disaster," he said, kissing Lena before scooping up Gracie. "What are we building today, little one?" "Mess," Gracie announced proudly, waving a pot lid. "Very good mess," Dante confirmed seriously. "Papa, remember you're coming to my presentation, right?" Nico asked. "You promised." "I'll be there. Front row. Wouldn't miss it." "And Mama?" "Already took the afternoon off," Lena confirmed. "All of us will be there." "Even Gracie?" "Even Gracie. Though she might require snacks to sit still." "I'll bring the dinosaur crackers. Those keep her happy." Lena plated pancakes. Nico's in a rough dinosaur shape, Gracie's cut into manageable pieces, and they settled around the table. This morning ritual had become sacred, the 4 of them together before the day scattered them to different obligations. "I got a call yesterday," Dante said between bites. "The Foundation received another grant, big one. We'll be able to expand the Safe House network by 3 more locations." The Marquez Romano Foundation had grown beyond their initial vision, now operating 12 safe houses across 3 states, providing resources for people trying to escape dangerous situations. Lena worked there part-time now, her nursing degree finally complete, using her skills to help others while Dante managed the business side. "That's incredible," Lena said. "Which cities?" "Detroit, Cleveland, and Milwaukee. All areas with high need." He paused. "I was thinking, maybe we do a site visit soon, see the operations, meet the people we're helping." "I'd like that. I'll check my schedule." "Mama, when I grow up, can I work at the foundation too?" Nico asked. "Help people like you and Papa do?" Lena felt her throat tighten. "You can do anything you want, sweetheart. But yes, if that's what you choose, we'd be honored to work with you." "Good. Because helping people is important. That's what families do." After breakfast, after the morning rush of getting Nico to school and Gracie to daycare, after Dante left for the office and Lena headed to the foundation, they reconvened that evening for the science presentation. Nico stood at the front of his classroom, confident and articulate, explaining dinosaur evolution with the kind of passion only a 7-year-old could muster. Gracie sat on Dante's lap, occasionally shouting "Dino" at appropriate moments. Lena watched her family, this impossible, beautiful family they'd built, and felt gratitude so intense it was almost painful. After the presentation, driving home through Chicago streets that had long since become familiar, Nico chattered about his next project while Gracie dozed in her car seat. "Papa, did you know that some people think birds are actually living dinosaurs? They evolved from small theropods. Isn't that amazing?" "That is amazing, buddy. Shows that things can transform into something completely different while still carrying their history with them." Lena caught Dante's eye in the rearview mirror, saw him register what he'd said, the metaphor for their own transformation. He smiled slightly, and she smiled back, this wordless communication that had become their language. At home, after bedtime routines and stories and the dozen small negotiations that came with 2 children, Dante and Lena finally collapsed onto their bed. "Remember when this house was just you and Nico?" Lena asked. "How quiet it was? I remember thinking I'd give anything to fill it with noise and chaos and life." He pulled her close. "Be careful what you wish for." "No regrets, though?" "Not a single one." He was quiet for a moment. "You know what today was? Thursday? The anniversary of the day I showed up in Chicago. 7 years ago today, I knocked on your door with Nico and begged you to give me a chance." Lena turned to look at him fully. "Has it really been 7 years?" 7 years since you chose to stay instead of run. 7 years since we started building this. He gestured vaguely at the house, at the life they'd created. Best decision I ever made, coming to find you. Best decision I ever made, letting you. Even with all the complications, the danger, the transformation, the constant work of building something new, especially because of those things. Easy love isn't love at all, it's just convenience. What we have is hard-earned and real, and worth every difficult moment. Dante kissed her softly. I love you, Lena Romano. Thank you for staying, for choosing us, for making me believe people can change. Thank you for proving they can, for being brave enough to dismantle everything you built and create something better. For being the father Nico and Gracie deserve and the partner I needed. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again. The beautiful, chaotic, ordinary work of being a family. Not perfect, not without struggles, but real and chosen and held together by something stronger than circumstance or convenience. Love that had survived separation and secrets. That had been tested by danger and doubt. That had been rebuilt on foundations of honesty and courage, and the revolutionary choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. Love that had transformed 2 broken people and 2 children into something whole. Love that would last. And in a house in Chicago, surrounded by dinosaur toys and family photos and the accumulated treasures of a life well lived, that love continued to grow, not despite the scars it bore, but because of them. Because Lena Marquez had learned that running doesn't solve anything, that visibility is stronger than hiding, that choosing to stay is the bravest act of all. And Dante Romano had learned that real power comes from vulnerability, that love without control is the only kind worth having, that becoming someone better is possible even after a lifetime of being someone worse. Together, they'd built something impossible made real, a family chosen on purpose, held together by promises kept and courage renewed daily. And it was enough. It was everything.